Welcome back to the channel, you curd nerds. We've got yet another mock check ride. It is another private pilot check ride. This one's in a Cirrus SR22 Turbo. So pretty fancy airplane, pretty expensive airplane, probably not going to be very relatable to most people. But before we get into that, we're gonna take that little check ride and we're gonna set it over here in a little box. All right. Before we get into that, I want to talk about just aviation in general, aviation in a whole. So there's only about 600,000 pilots in the United States, and that includes student pilots, commercial pilots, airline pilots, private pilots, recreational pilots, sport pilots, pilot pilots, just pilots in general. It's about 600,000 compared to the 333 million people in the United States. So it's a small group of people. It's a very, very tight-knit group. It's a small community. Most pilots know each other. Okay, I lie. Most pilots don't know each other, but a lot of pilots get to know each other. And through these mock check rides, and as being an instructor, I have met a wide range of people. I have met doctors, lawyers, truck drivers, fast food workers, student pilots that are just there just to be students, to become pilots. And this person, for this mock check ride, actually helped develop Streamlabs, believe it or not. He was one of the people that helped develop the app that many of us content creators use to stream to Twitch, Kick, Facebook, etc. And normally, me and this person would probably never engage with each other. But because of aviation, we now have the opportunity to learn from one another. We now have the opportunity to talk to one another. I'm evaluating him, whether or not he's ready for a check ride. And you know, I get the opportunity to talk to somebody that, if we're just going to be honest, really helped springboard a lot of my content and career because I started on using Streamlabs. So let's get into the mock check ride. And by the way, merch link in bio. I'll just ask, since we've hit that record button so I can get it recorded, are you okay with me recording this and using it on, social media, YouTube, Instagram, etc.?
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So I like to go through the script that every DPE is going to go through in the event that you're taking a check ride with them. They're going to ask for all your documents, your logbook to make sure all your endorsements are correct. If you want to verify that your endorsements are correct, it's Advisory Circular 6165 Hotel, the appendix in the back. That's going to have all the endorsements broken down specifically by what rating that you're going for, whether it be private pilot, recreational, etc. Since you're in an SR22 Turbo, you're going to need a couple extra endorsements that aren't just required by private pilot. You're going to need that complex and high performance, correct?
Just the high performance.
Just the high performance, because you don't have retractable gear, so it's not complex. It's just Cirruses are fun, aren't they?
That's all I know. That's all I've trained in. So.
Well, so before I get a little any farther into this, I've seen when it comes to Cirrus pilots, and no offense to you, I don't know you from Adam or anything like that. I've seen a pretty hard reliance on the systems that are available in the aircraft, and maybe even a kind of a sense of invulnerability given the parachute. So I actually did one of these, and I asked somebody what their personal minimums were, and they responded with aircraft limitations. And I'm like,
I think that sums up the problem very well.
Yeah, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I mean, the fatality rate in Cirruses is higher than the general aviation, even with the parachute, right? So people are crashing at a much higher rate. Now, they're not necessarily, well, they're also dying at a higher rate, but without the parachute, it would be much, much worse. Precisely because of that. I think people can afford a more expensive plane. They think they're smarter. They think the rules don't apply to them, whatever, and they do dumb shit.
Yeah, and it's nuts. How often it happens, and how many times you see somebody come in with their Cirrus and bounce it halfway down the runway, and they log every single one of them as landings.
Touch and go.
That counts, right?
Touch and go.
So just keep that in mind. Again, I don't know you. I just know based on my experience teaching people, talking to people.
I hear you.
There's definitely a demographic. So make sure all your endorsements are correct. Make sure your logbook's in order. Make sure it's totaled. Don't total it in pen. I don't know if you're using a digital logbook. I very rarely recommend a paper logbook. Digital logbooks are awesome. I use my flight book.
Yeah. Use ForeFlight.
Yeah, ForeFlight's great as well. I used ForeFlight for the longest time until I became an airline pilot, and then I realized I was paying $200 a year for a logbook.
Yep.
So then we go into the 3 different outcomes of a check ride, right? We got satisfactory, unsatisfactory, and incomplete. Satisfactory means that you're consistently within the standards. Doesn't necessarily mean you don't momentarily drop out of the standards. I use steep turns as an example. If you drop 5 knots too slow on your steep turns, right? It's not the end of the check ride, right? Just apply the prompt and appropriate correction to get back up to your altitude, back up to your airspeed, and continue on with the check ride. Same thing when it comes to the oral portion. There's not the expectation that you're going to know the answer to every single question. Okay. If you need to look something up, it's not the end of the world. If you need to look up everything, maybe there's some more knowledge that you might need to go gain. Then we've got unsatisfactory, something nobody ever wants to hear on a check ride, but it happens. Don't let it get you down. But this is things like consistently outside of the standards, having to look up every answer. You don't have the knowledge of like safety critical items. Things like, what's the response? How do you recover from a spin in a Cirrus? Caps. But also, if the DPE or the examiner has to prevent a pilot deviation, an exceedance of aircraft limitations, damaging other person's property. The example I use is at the University of North Dakota. And again, no shame on UND. It's just, they train a lot of people. Accidents happen, just purely by statistics. Accidents are going to happen. They had an airplane that taxied into another one and sliced it all to bits with the propeller because they had a student that was going for their solo. They set their parking brake during the pre-flight. Then when they went to go do their after start checklist, they had released their feet off the brakes, but the parking brake wasn't set very well, and it rolled in while they were reading a checklist. Right. So if the DPE's got to slam on the brakes to prevent something like that, obviously not gonna pass that check ride. Then we've got incomplete. If you want to look up the reasons that are appropriate for an incomplete, it's regulation 6143 Bravo. And that's gonna cover all the reasons. It's things like illness, aircraft airworthiness, weather, anything that's going to impact the safety of flight, right? And then the last question that they're going to ask is, do you understand the standards that have been presented to you in the Airman Certification Standards?
Yep.
Awesome.
I've read it multiple times.
Awesome. Last thing, during a check ride, if you got to go use the restroom, you need to go get a drink of water, you need to take a break, say something, okay? You hear the horror stories of students saying like, oh, I failed my check ride because, I was, an hour and a half into it and then I had to pee and then I couldn't think straight. So I like to get into systems right off the bat, just because, if you don't know your airplane, the rest of the check ride's probably not going to go too well. So I'm going to jump into your aircraft's systems in your POH, and let's start talking about it. What can you tell me about this aircraft engine?
It's an IO Continental 550. 550. I mean, I can go into those details if you want, but that's the engine.
So how much horsepower does it generate?
310.
Awesome. Now, you said it's an IO 550. What does that I mean as part of that IO 550?
Fuel injection.
All right, it's fuel injected. What are some of the benefits of having a fuel injected airplane versus like a carbureted airplane?
So carburetors are more susceptible to icing.
Okay.
Fuel injection, you get better performance, you get better fuel efficiency. You can have some issues with fuel injected as well, but generally they're better than carburetors.
All right. So what are some of those issues you might have with fuel injection?
So I think in the Cirrus that I fly, the turbo specifically, the most common issue is fuel vaporization in the tubes.
Yeah.
At low pressure. So if you're flying high enough and the ambient air pressure is low enough, or if it's a really hot day, or both. So that's the number one issue that runs into that engine.
vapor lock, right? I've had it on the ground, never flying. It's really hard to get the dang thing started after that. Awesome. So this thing, is it turbocharged or turbo normalized?
Turbocharged.
All right, let me jump down to your section 7. So this thing's got a pretty complex electrical system, right? So what can you tell me about this aircraft's electrical system?
You mean just in terms of the batteries and alternators?
Yeah, batteries, alternators. What switches do? If you start to see, any kind of enunciations that you don't agree with, what might you do? What might you do with those enunciations? Just kind of a general description of the electrical system.
Yeah. So you've got two batteries, Bat 1 and Bat 2. They're 24-volt batteries. And then you've got two alternators, Alt 1, Alt 2. That the voltages on that are slightly higher than the batteries. I believe it's like 26 or something on one and 25 on the other. So slightly higher than the batteries. I forget what the amperages on there are, but I can look it up. I think it was 40. I can't remember. And then yeah, I mean they power the whole system. The aircraft is basically powered by electricity. So if you lose power, you lose everything. You get about, they say, 30 to 45 minutes of backup on the batteries. But yeah, if you lose power, you land the thing ASAP.
Yeah, because this aircraft, it's not traditionally controlled, right? It's, a lot of older airplanes, right? We've got magnetos. This thing's got FADEC, correct?
No, actually, it has
No,
magnetos.
it does have
No,
magnetos. So why? So
yeah.
you're saying, oh, because this has
The
other.
engine will keep running,
The
but you
engine's gonna.
lose PFD, MFD, even the backup gauges you lose. The
Oh,
one with the FADEC is the Vision Jet. So the Cirrus is SF50 Vision Jet. That one has FADEC.
that's it. That's it. Sorry.
That would be a dream aircraft.
Yeah. So
Not quite there yet.
yeah, not quite there yet. So I'm looking through your. So if you were to lose your main alternator 1, what systems would you expect to still have?
Um, yeah, I need to go learn these in terms of what systems are tied to which alts and batteries. I've seen it lots of times in the videos. I just haven't memorized it.
Okay.
But there's a checklist, so
there,
I can
there,
run through the checklist.
there is a
Get notes on
checklist. It looks like from what I'm seeing, just based on your here, I'll show you what I'm looking at, just so that we can kind of be
Sure.
on the same page. Because again, I have a couple hours in a Cirrus, not a whole
Yeah.
lot when it comes to like ground instruction in them.
Mhm.
I'm looking at your electrical diagram and I'm seeing essential bus 1 and 2 off of bat 1 and 2. And if I'm looking through, it looks like just on your essential bus, if you still have your alternator 2, you've got a main distribution bus, which should power. Looked like it went to, oh God, I wish these were color coded. So 60 amps, main distribution bus, your essential bus. Looks like you will keep your non-essential bus when it comes, if you still have alternator 2. Oh, this is different from the SR20. That's what I was looking at, because the SR20, you drop down to just your essential bus. If you lose alternator 1 and you continue to operate on alternator 2, but it seems like you definitely get to keep a whole lot more on the 22
Yeah, so the
turbo.
way I understand it, I haven't memorized it, but I did understand it, is they've basically split the systems almost 50-50 across Alt 1 and Alt 2.
Mm-hmm.
And so in case you lose one, you lose like COM 1, NAV 1, one of the MFD or PFD. But that's how they do the backup, is you'll still have like one channel of basically everything running,
Yep.
which
That
is great.
that is great. I absolutely love that. I can definitely see why people love Cirruses, because what I would give for being able to just actually to not have to be concerned about losing everything in the event of
I
it.
would say the number one reason people buy a Cirrus is because of their significant other. Because you go to your wife and you tell her it has a parachute, and she's like, "Fine, I approve you flying." That is the number one reason they sell.
That is hilarious because I told my wife I wanted to buy a seaplane and she was like, "Ooh, when?" And I didn't even get I didn't get an icon, because that thing's got a parachute as well. I got um just I got a Lake 200. That's what I got. Sitting here struggling to remember my own airplane. All right, let's get into some limitations of your aircraft. We'll just go over the basic stuff like V speeds. Um, Trying to find. Oh, that's section 1. Should be section 2 for limitations. There we go. All right. So this thing's got a couple different VNE operations, right? So what is your lowest VNE based on altitude, not speed?
Based on, sorry, can you explain that?
So if I am below 15,000 feet,
okay,
what would my VNE be?
I believe it's 200. Or is it 210?
Be 205.
205.
Yep.
Okay.
So if I'm above 18,000, if I'm
falls to 170,
it falls to one.
you're above.
I'm looking at, these are serialized as, or some of this is based on maybe a slightly different serial number than yours. I'm seeing 175, but
yeah. Okay.
How is that depicted on your speed tape?
Yeah, so it'll be the yellow and the red arcs, or not arcs in this case. It'll be like a tape. It's a tape. So 175 is your yellow, and the start of 205 is basically the top end of the yellow arc, and the start of the red arc, or tape in this case.
Awesome. Now,
and then my maneuvering speed is 140, so VA is 140.
I know it's weird. They call it VO in these things. For operating maneuvering speed.
Yeah.
So now that is your VO at your maximum weight of 3,600 pounds, correct?
Yeah.
Now,
correct. And then if I'm lighter, it goes down.
Now, can you explain to me why?
Because there's less weight.
Okay. So why does weight have anything to do with my maneuvering speed? Like, what is my maneuvering speed allowing me to do if I am below it? If I'm, at my max weight of 3,600 pounds and I'm cruising around at 120 knots, what can I do with my controls?
You can do one full deflection of the flight controls.
All right.
Without stalling without breaking the plane before stalling it. So, I can pull back full, and it's not going to break the plane.
Awesome. Now, if I'm down at 2,400 pounds, right, 1,200 pounds less than my max gross weight, obviously my VO or my VA is going to be less. Mm-hmm. Why is there that shift? Now, you said it's just because it's a lighter airplane.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but
it's because of forces, right? So there's increased force on the flight control surfaces of the plane. The lighter you are, because what's it called, the deflection is just going to have increased G as a percentage, increased G forces for the same movement.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about available lift, right? If I'm at my max gross weight, the wing is, I'm already asking a lot from the wing. Right? I'm already asking a lot from the control surfaces. They're closer to their limit. They're closer so they can't provide as much acceleration. Right now, when I reduce my weight, I'm not as close to that limit. The aircraft those control surfaces can apply a whole lot more acceleration to the aircraft, which can eventually get to damaging it. Now, you have a composite aircraft. Me and my, dumpy old aluminum airplane from the 1980s, if it gets damaged, it's pretty obvious. The thing starts to wrinkle. Is that the same thing with your composite airplane?
No, so that's a good point. It's not going to wrinkle. It's not, but it can develop like stress fractures that are hard to see. And so any kind of, so it can take a much higher impact force, but the moment it crumbles or cracks or chips or whatever, you're kind of screwed because it's got to go get redone, because then it can just crumple.
Yeah, especially if moisture gets in there, especially if you live up somewhere north, moisture gets in between the lamination layers, and then the airplane freezes. Oh God,
Mhm.
I could only imagine how much it would cost for a relamination on a wing on a Cirrus. Um,
Your salary.
yeah,
I mean, it's crazy. Yeah.
yeah. I hopefully you got good insurance that covers like
Not as a
wrenches.
student pilot, they screw you over so hard. It's amazing.
Oh,
I'm sure you've been through it before, but
well, how much? I mean, if you don't mind me asking, how much
yeah.
is like hull coverage? Full hull coverage on a Cirrus?
Yeah. So for, really entry level pilots like me, they'll start off at 3% of hull value. Um, so, just for number's sake, on $1 million airplane, that'll be 30,000 a year. And then I think once you get your instrument rating, and 100, 200 hours of flight time, falls down to 2%. And then I think above 500 hours or something falls to 1.5%, and it kind of evens out there.
That's not bad. I mean, I'm paying on my seaplane. I'm paying what about 4% of whole value, and it has no intention of ever going down every year. But again,
Yeah.
my airplane's 100 grand. Yours is.
Yeah. Because the liability part is probably flat, right? And so I think once you account for the liability, then maybe that's why, because not for the plane liability, but for the passengers liability.
Well, with a seaplane, it's not even passenger liability. It's the fact that they have to go get the damn thing out of the water if I crash it.
That's true.
Like
Can't
they
call it towing truck.
they can't just leave it down there. They have to go get it. And that's why I'm not really that upset. 4 grand a year.
Mhm.
And I am, and they're gonna go down there with scuba divers and bags and whatnot to go recover the airplane, and I don't have to pay for it. Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, $4,000 a year. That sounds reasonable. All right. So, what is the white arc on your aircraft, or the white part of your speed tape? What is it depicting?
Sorry, could you repeat that? My dog was barking.
No, no, you're fine. What is the white arc or the white range on your speed tape depicting in your aircraft?
The stall speed.
Okay, so bottom of the white arc, sure, I'd agree with that.
Mhm. Yeah.
What about the top of the white arc?
It's your flap extension speed.
Now, um, is there any time that I can extend the flaps above that speed?
No, not unless you want to break them. So the speeds are for the turbo 150 and 110. So at 50% it's 150 and 100% it's 110.
Oh, do you have a growing speed tape, or do you have a speed tape that adjusts based on your configuration?
Uh, you mean how the plane is configured?
Yeah, so if I'm using like the Airbus for example,
Yeah.
if I'm at flap 0 and I start slowing the airplane down, I get a orange little marker that shows me where my next flap configuration limit is.
Got it.
Does your white tape grow like if you were at 160 knots, would your
Mhm.
white tape be at 150?
Yeah, it'll be a 150. I
Okay.
don't think it changes.
Okay. Um,
Although I will look next time I fly. I haven't noticed it that clearly. I'll
'Cause
double check.
the only reason I ask is because when we look at like a Cessna 172, you can technically give 10 degrees of flaps on a Cessna 172 at 110, but the white arc on the speed tape doesn't start till 85.
Got it.
All right. And that's why I'm asking is that your VFE for 50% flaps is 150, right?
Mm-hmm.
But your white arc, according to the POH, goes from 64 to 110.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's what I'm saying. If you're above 110, can you introduce flaps?
Not at 100%.
Yeah.
So it has two notches of flaps, right? So the first notch is at 150 or less, and then second one is 110 or less.
All right. Now, what's the maximum demonstrated parachute deployment speed?
140.
140, right? Um, awesome. I don't really need
Although
to.
they do tell you to change it quite a bit based on the situation, right? So if you go through the checklist, if there's a fire, for example, they actually want you to descend as quickly as possible to 2,000 feet AGL and then pull. Um, and so there's situations in which you also speed, but also height. You may want to do it differently.
Yeah, because isn't like the lowest demonstrated deployment on those like 1500 AGL?
It's 600.
600 AGL. Oh wow, that's damn. I mean a little close to the ground. I'm like,
Yeah, the POH recommends to set a hard deck at 2000 feet AGL and then decide at that point, are you going to land it or you're going to pull the chute? And so I think that gives you a buffer of 1400 feet. Um, but yeah, there's the procedures when you're taking off at 600 feet. There's actually an annunciation that comes at 600 feet to tell you that it's when you say caps active or caps speed alive or sorry, caps
caps
live.
available or caps alive.
Yeah.
Huh. That's nice. Well, let's get into some emergencies. All right. You've got a whole lot of emergency procedures, and you actually have boxed items which are intended as memory items. And any DPE that does check rides in an aircraft with boxed items, it is the expectation to have these kind of memorized. I wouldn't necessarily say verbatim, but pretty
Mhm.
dang close, right? So what's your course of action if you had an engine failure at a low take or engine failure on takeoff at a low altitude? So below that 600 foot, below that caps available enunciation.
Um, you land it right in front of you wherever you can. I mean, at that point, you've got seconds to decide because this plane does not glide at all. It sinks like a rock. And so literally you have seconds. If you're under 600 feet, like you're going to, if there's available runway, great. If not, maybe within a 10-15 degree sort of angle, that's really all you have to turn and land the plane.
All right. So is there anything you should probably be doing with the control with anything in the aircraft? Like let's say this happened at 500 feet, right? You got a little bit more time. I know glide ratio on this thing's not great. Glide ratio on my airplane's not great either.
Mhm.
But just for safety, kind of like fire prevention, is there any other steps that you might want to accomplish before hitting the ground?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So um, you look at fuel. So you've got your mixture lever, you pull it back. Depends if you're going to try and restart the engine or not. I don't think at 500 feet you're going to restart the engine. There's not enough time. So you pull your mixture back, you pull your throttle back, you turn your fuel selector to off, um, turn off the boost pump, um, and turn your switch off. Um, um, and hope for the best
Yeah,
because it's really a shitty situation.
it it is. I've had an engine failure at 80 feet. It sucks.
Oh wow, that's scary, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it
Yeah.
was. It was. So just to go over it, these are boxed items. It's engine failure on takeoff, low altitude, best glide or landing speed established, mixture cut off, fuel selector off, ignition switch off, flaps as required. Um,
Mhm.
just having those, being able to rattle those off, um, is I'd say it's really vital to
Yeah.
ensure that you're prepared in the event that it happens, right?
Yeah.
'Cause, my engine failure at 80 feet was in an airplane I had 5 minutes in.
Okay.
All the entire amount of time I had in this airplane was from the taxi and the run up.
Wow.
Okay. But I read through the POH and I memorized the emergency procedures. Okay. Before I ever got in this. Right. Now, what are you? Well, you have anti-ice and de-ice and all kinds of other
Mhm.
fancy stuff. This thing is certified for flight into known icing, correct?
It is.
Oh God, I'm jealous.
And I have used it once in a thunderstorm by mistake. But I was with a CFI, and yeah, that was a fun, fun learning experience.
Oh, you've got all that equipment and you still ended up in a thunderstorm. You mind going over like how that happened?
Yeah, so we did a flight from John Wayne, Orange County, to Phoenix, and on the way back, we knew that there was some um, forecast for it, but I was with an experienced CFI, and we just wanted to like experience using some of these systems. So we had a choice of stopping before the storms, and it wasn't like a squall line of storms. It was like isolated showers, right? But so we made the decision to go through it, and there's a famous pass called the Banning Pass if you're going from California to Arizona. So these two amazing mountains, and it's Palm Springs right at the start. I don't know if you've flown through it, but
I think I have. Yeah,
yeah.
I've flown from Arizona to California before.
Yeah, so we were getting through the batting pass, and there was a isolated kind of system right there, and so we're going around it, and it was just incredible to see like right next to you, just dumping, but then where we were, there wasn't that much. Um, so yeah, we did turn on the Fiki system, and that liquid kept seeping for like 3 days after, and just made a mess of the hangar. Uh, but
Oh.
I probably had my most entertaining ATC call. So as we're going through the batting pass, ATC is usually very direct and like sterile, and so this guy calls me up, is like 488 Bravo Whiskey. Yeah, so how are you guys doing up there? And my response was like, we're doing great. He just cracked up.
That is hilarious, because that's I've been in icing in general aviation twice, uh and no, it was not as an enjoyable experience as that. It was once was in a Cessna 172, and we were picking up ice, and I ended up having to like grab an ILS and do like an emergency ILS to get out of it. The only other time I picked up ice was on my seaplane, because I put it in the water. Like the water temperature was like 40, but the air temperature was like 36. And I kind of jumped the gun, and I was like, I'm just ready to, because I had just gotten the prop rebuilt. So I hadn't flown the thing in like 6 months. So I was like, I'm going to go. And I went and just did a little splash and go. And the entire
Wow.
underside was covered in ice after that. And
Wow, that's interesting. For seaplane, that's a whole other mess for
yeah,
icing. Yeah.
um, my gear came down. So I was still okay. And now just because the water is thawed does not mean that you won't pick up icing. Um,
Yeah, no, icing is serious stuff. As I've gotten into aviation, I've really like there are these YouTube channels that break down accidents, right? And so I've watched hours and hours of case studies, and because like initially I was like, I'm just gonna be a pilot, and I very much had that Cirrus mentality of I'll get a plane, I'll learn how to fly, and it'll be fine. And the more I learn about accidents, and it's a very humbling experience, and like it really teaches you quite a bit.
yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I've had 3 engine failures and only one ended up in the dirt. And it took that one where I ended up in the dirt for me to realize I need to stop flying other people's dumpy airplanes.
yeah.
Um, uh, after
Yeah.
that's the thing. I went through 2 and I'm like, that's a fluke.
Yeah.
I still made it to pavement.
The
Uh,
stats on the engine failures for piston engines is one out of every 3,000 hours is a engine failure on a piston. And on turbine, it's about 100x lower, right? So it's about one every 300,000.
yep.
And like right there is like, oh my God, like think about a 1 in 3,000 chance we're taking every time we fly.
Yep. Yep. And it is. Well, that means I'm good. I've had 3. Like the just purely statistically speaking, like I can't have another.
I hope
Oh,
not.
yeah, no, it's not good. But speaking about engine failures, how are you going to try and relight your engine if you do happen to lose it in flight?
Yeah, so let's say I'm above, 2,000 feet and I have an engine failure. So the first thing is you establish your glide speed. So dogs, I don't know if you can hear the barking.
Yeah, a
All
little bit, but again, I've got
right, one
when
second.
I go to oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so the first thing you do is you establish glide speed, um, which in my plane is 91, 92. Um, and then you um, turn everything off, and you try and restart it. So, uh, well, not sorry. Actually, let's check the fuel. So it's fuel, air, and spark. So let's check the fuel. I would be going through the checklist here, but I have memorized. So I'll just go through it, which is you check your mixture. Sometimes the mixture is too lean, and that's what caused the roughness and failure. So just adjust the mixture, throttle, just go back and forth a little, a few times, and see if that fixes it. Um, Turn the boost pump on if it's off. Prime it if it's not working. check the fuel selector. In so many cases, it's literally people just forgot to switch the tank. So check the tank. Let's say none of that works. You open the alternate air. So in the 22, there is 20 and 22, there's a manual plug right under your right foot. On the turbo, it turns on automatically, and so there's no switch for it. And then you cycle your sparks, so your magneto. So you just try and restart the engine. Um, and if none of that works, you just switch everything off, and then your decision is either I'm going to land this or I'm going to pull caps.
All right. So the only thing I would say is, again, I'm reading through this POH specifically. Um, airspeed, best glide, awesome. What I teach is like the ABCs of engine failures: airspeed, best place to land checklist. So airspeed, best glide, great. Next step, fuel selector. As you said, it's most commonly fuel selector. So start with the most common problem, right? Ignition, check and make sure it's on both. Fuel pump on, power level. We're not going to wiggle it. If I'm wiggling it, that means something probably broke, and wiggling it isn't really going to help me. Plus, I don't want this thing to start back up at, wide open throttle. Then I'm risking overheating turbos. I'm risking not inefficient, but uneven heating of the engine. I see it all the time at my airport. People with Cirrus starting the thing up at like half open throttle, and it like wraps up to 1900 RPM and on a cold engine. And I'm like, ooh, but power level is going to be half inch open, mixture, idle cutoff, and then slowly advance until engine starts. Then if we don't have an engine start, again, we're going bat and master switches on. This is the engine air start, right? Oh God, I'm looking at the wrong thing. That's air. No, that's right. Bat master switch on, power levels open half an inch, mixture rich is required, fuel selector switch tanks, ignition switch both. That's that relight in flight. But you brought up caps. So let's talk about a caps deployment. Once I find the caps deployment section.
There's my dog, by the way.
Oh.
He likes to be on calls.
That is adorable. That is adorable. All right.
Do you want me to walk you through the caps?
Yeah, go ahead and walk me through the caps, because I was looking for the caps deploy. There, I think I found it. All right, go ahead. Yeah, walk me through a caps deployment.
Sure. So once you decide you want to pull caps, you should be above 600 feet AGL. You take the pin. Well, pin's already out, hopefully, because it's usually tied to your key. You pull it. It's about 45 pounds of force, so it's like doing a chin up. So it's a fairly hard pull. And brief your passengers so they know what to expect. I think there's a good amount of G forces that I think it's like 3 or 4G, maybe 5G that people experience. And then you turn everything off. And so mixture back, throttle back, fuel selector to off, fuel pump to off, turn all the switches off, so the whole electrical's off, and turn off the ignition. There's really not a special brace position. They just want you to sit upright and put your hands on your legs. The seats have like crumple zones, so they take some of the force. And yeah, and hope for the best.
I mean, from what I've heard, like the caps pulled at the appropriate altitude has been, it's always been 100%. Like nobody's died from an appropriate caps pull.
Yeah.
And that is interesting that the SR22 doesn't depict a brace position, because the SR20 does in its POH, which was kind of what I was looking for. As I was looking for, its brace position, so that you could kind of walk me through as if I was a passenger. So how would you brief a passenger when it comes to the bracing? Like, how would you, if you ended up in this situation, in all honesty, I'd brief passengers on the ground before we ever
Yeah.
even take off, right? Um, what kind of briefing would you give a passenger about the CAPS deployment? Talk to me as if I'm a passenger.
Sure. Yeah, so the briefing is done on the ground. It's part of the checklist item when you're taking off, which is look in the event of an emergency, either myself, let's say I pass out, or something happens. It's the blue, red, red checklist that you tell passengers. So hit the blue button, which basically puts the plane in straight and level flight, um, and then it maintains that. Um, so they have some time in case, let's say, I pass out, but then I regain consciousness or whatever. So just hit the blue button and then wait a little, see what happens. But in case they need to pull caps, um, they're turning everything off and then they're pulling caps. And so it's the red is um, uh, the mixture, the throttle, the fuel selector, um, um, and then they pull caps. And then it's the same. Pull it with two hands. Put a lot of force on it because it needs about 45 pounds of pull. Um, yeah, that's the passenger briefing.
Awesome, awesome. Now, the only thing I might include, I mean, the only thing I would include is, well, again, there's no specific bracing position, so there's nothing to really include there. Um, Now, talk to me about your propeller, since you are in a constant speed propeller and it's not controlled by FADEC. It is controlled by a blue lever.
No, no, there's no lever. So
Okay.
the lever is tied to the throttle, and so it's a neat trick where there is no prop lever. You just like it controls it automatically. Well, actually, let me explain it more detail. So in the SR20 and the 22, it is just controlled by a hydraulic system tied to the throttle. And so, and on the turbo, there's a separate, they have it tied to the throttle as well, but then there's a separate governor as well. I forget what's it called, but it's a slightly different system.
Okay.
Uh,
So awesome. Now it's a propeller governor. It's a prop governor. I think they're if I don't have the maintenance log and it doesn't have any expanded diagrams for your propeller in this POH. I think it seems like it's kind of connected through almost like an accelerator pump or some kind of spring loaded system where it ensures that you're not going to overspeed the prop due to fast power applications.
mhm.
Is the
Yeah, so
turbo
there's a I can draw it out, but there's a system where yeah, it opens and closes based on certain inputs, and so there is regulation. Now, in case it breaks, your prop's probably your RPMs are going to start going up, um, and that's how you know. And then you run through your checklist.
run through the appropriate
Yeah.
propeller? There's propeller governor equipped with it. Yeah, it doesn't give you much when you look through section 7. The airplane is equipped with a composite 3-bladed constant speed governor regulated propeller. The propeller governor automatically adjusts propeller pitch to regulate propeller and engine RPM by controlling the flow of engine oil boosted to a high pressure and a governing pump to or from the piston propeller. All right, when oil pressure to the piston in the propeller hub is relieved, centrifugal force assists by an internal spring twists the propeller to a low pitch or a high RPM.
Hmm.
Awesome, awesome. Let's get into um, your privileges and airworthiness first. I always try to skip airworthiness for some reason. Um, Now, what documents are required in this airplane?
To fly it, you mean?
Yeah, like for the airplane to
Yeah.
be airworthy, right? What documents are required to be in an airworthy aircraft?
Yeah. So you need your registration, um, which I'm still waiting for from the FAA because they clearly don't adhere to their own timelines. Uh,
You do know how to apply for an extension, right?
so it's not expired. So when I bought a new plane, you get a temporary registration, right? And then on their website, it shows that it's been updated, but I don't have the updated physical one with me. So I'm using the temporary one right now.
Okay.
Um,
Now,
Is there a way to extend the temporary one?
yes, you can extend the temporary one, and it's actually pretty simple. It's because I had to do it with my airplane.
Okay.
It's pretty simple. You go to the FAA. I actually think there might be instructions on your temp on how to extend it.
Okay.
Um, so just make sure you do have a valid temp in the event that it does expire. And yeah, the FAA is kind of weird. They sent me my registration, and then like 6 months later, they sent it to me again. Uh, I'm
Yeah,
like,
I tried calling them, I tried emailing them. It's like a huge bureaucracy. That, anyways,
yeah, yeah,
so you need your registration, you need your airworthiness certificate, and part of that being not valid, but what's the right word? Applicable or active is you need to comply with all the ADs and all the required inspections. That ensures your aircraft is in airworthy state. Um, then you need your POH, which should have your weight and balance. Um, and that's about it. Am I
yeah.
missing something? Yeah,
No, I
that's
mean
it.
in a Cirrus, you're not really missing anything because the avionics and equipment that's installed in a Cirrus from the factory is usually pretty good. You don't need to install anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But my airplane, for example, it didn't come with a GPS. It didn't come with fancy
Sure.
radios or anything. So, if I ever get enough money to install them, uh, I'll need the supplements as well
Yeah.
associated with that, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so looking through the logbook of your airplane, you already brought it up. You brought up some kind of maintenance items, right? But if you were to
Mm-hmm.
look through your logbook, what are you looking for to make sure that this aircraft has complied with all of its inspections and required maintenance?
Yeah, so you look at your ADs and see if all the ADs are complied to. So I made a printout of all the ADs for the SR22s. Um, then you're looking for your annual inspection, and if you're renting the plane for your 100-hour inspection. In my case, they also do a 50-hour inspection for the warranty. So it's like 50, 100 annual. And then you've got some more inspections for the ELT battery, and then for VOR if you're instrument, and for some of the other stuff. There's one more. What's it called? Um, I forget now. But yeah,
How
those
does
are
ATC see you?
transponder. It's every
Transponder.
2 years.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, your ELT, you brought that up in the battery. How often does that battery need to be replaced or recharged if you have a rechargeable one?
Yeah, so I don't I know, so technically it's at 50% of the battery life, stated battery life. Um, um, or is it every 2 years? Uh, Actually, no, it's 50% of the battery life. Um, or if it's actually been used, then 50% remaining, I believe, if it's been used. Um, yeah,
So, it's 1 hour of cumulative use,
one
unknown
hour.
usage,
Yeah,
or unknown usage is another good one because right, if you come
yeah,
out to the airplane, the ELT's on. Was it on for 10
yeah,
minutes? Was it on for 10 hours? Right.
yeah,
When it comes to 50% of its useful life, it's not like my phone is at 50%. It's like this this D cell battery that I've got expires in
yeah.
2034, so I need to
Mm-hmm.
replace it in 2029.
Got it.
That's that 50% of useful life, not
Mm-hmm.
like phone 50%
Yeah.
charge, right? Now, your airplane, let's say the anti-ice system is
Mm-hmm.
inoperative for some reason. Like you ran out of fluid, and the airport you're at doesn't have enough fluid to refill your anti-ice system. Is this airplane still airworthy?
Um, for like non-icing situations or icing situations?
For non, just a VFR
Yeah.
day flight.
Yes, it is.
So where would you look to verify that, like, if something was inoperative or was broken or missing? Where would you look to verify that the aircraft was still okay to operate in that kinds of operation?
Sure. So the POH, I don't have the POH with me right now. It's in the plane, but there's a whole list, and it breaks that list down into by day or by night. And it just goes item by item, and then what you're allowed to fly or not fly. There's also, of course, 91205 in which lists out. Um, so in order of priority, I would look at the plane's POH first, and then if that's okay, then you look at 205. And then there's 213 as well, but 205 is the actual list of stuff.
Okay, what else is checked in 213? You brought it up earlier.
Mm-hmm. What else is checked? Sorry, could you?
So 213, so 91205, that's your 8 tomato flames flaps. All right, your POH, that's that kinds of equipment kinds of operation equipment list. Right, so that the anti-ice is what we brought up, and you brought up airworthiness directives as well. There's two other things that you would need to check just to verify that if there was some other item broken that wasn't in any of those. What's two other places you could check? So we've got our
ADs.
So we brought up ADs.
So you've got your service bulletins.
Service bulletins aren't federally mandated. They're not technically required. Your insurance will probably be pissed off at you if you don't comply with them, but the FAA doesn't give a shit. We got TCDS, the type certificate data sheet. Okay. Right? Yeah. What equipment did the aircraft come with from the factory that the factory says, hey, we need these? And then you got supplemental type certificates, right? Yeah. I guess the SR20 gets you can get an STC that splits the prop and the throttle again so that you can get a blue lever, right? So if your STC now adds that blue lever be there. So if that blue lever was broken or something, right? Got it. Does your aircraft need a landing light?
To land during the day, no.
Now, what about, your KOEL probably says that you need it at night. No. Mm-hmm. All right. Let's get into some regulations. So you're getting your private pilot certificate, not instrument or anything like that, just your private pilot certificate right now. And congratulations, you passed. What can you do now that you couldn't do before?
I can carry passengers. I can carry my dogs. So actually, dogs are interesting. I could probably carry dogs before.
That is a weird one because, like, when you're operating as a student pilot, it says solo, as in you are the sole occupant of the aircraft. Yeah. So I'm still going to go with no about dogs with student solo.
Yeah. Because it says passengers, right? It's funny if dog is a passenger or not.
Well, it says sole occupant. It doesn't say passengers. Sure. So I guess it depends. Like, I think my cat would definitely be an occupant, right?
It's true. They take far more mental space than a human does.
Oh God.
Yeah.
All right.
I hear you. So I can fly with passengers. I can get reimbursed based on my pro rata share of the flight, as long as it's for a common purpose. I can do some charity events where the plane is basically used for charity purposes. I'm actually going to do that. There's these like pause flight where you can like transport dogs for animal shelters. I think that sounds super cool. I might actually sign up for that.
Yeah, I've had some friends do it. They said it was a blast.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so those are my privileges. Passengers is the big one.
Yep. Now you could also go to Bravo Airspace without an endorsement. True. Yep, and you're also fast enough that they might not be pissed off at you for doing it.
Yeah, Bravo's been interesting because I'm always flying because Southern California is such a crowded airspace that I'm always flight following, and every like literally 3-4 minutes I'm switching like which tower or which control center I'm talking to, and yeah, so you don't really even think about Bravo space because even though I'm surrounded by Bravo, I'm right in the middle of LA and San Diego. Because flight service will actually fly you into Bravo. Sometimes you don't even know, and they're like, oh, go to this altitude or turn this heading, for traffic, and so I think a lot of that Bravo airspace headache is like taken up by flight following.
Yeah, and that's a perfect way to think of it. When you're under control of when you're under the control of a controlling agency, right, of the person that's in charge of that airspace, they can clear you into it, right? Right. And you already brought up the common purpose, right? So the question I normally ask to get students to make sure that they understand that whole common purpose is, your mom comes to visit you and, she gets a rental. She flies to the closest Bravo airspace. She gets a rental car. and she offers to give you $100 in gas to fly her back to the airport because she doesn't want to drive back to LA because it's an hour drive or something, right? So there's no common purpose there,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, I'm brown. We don't take money from our moms. We give money to our moms.
Well, let's say you got a buddy or something. I don't know. It's oh god, that's hilarious. All right. So even though you've got a really nice airplane that's got, all kinds of fancy avionics, if you are in Charlie airspace, how far, what's the visibility and cloud clearance requirements?
So I have a question here. I have it written down. Is it okay in the oral to reference? I have it memorized, but I'm just curious. Like, is it okay to look at this stuff?
Um, so here's the thing. It really all depends on the DPE. I'd say no,
Okay,
unless it's like on your knee board
sure.
that you're going to have in flight. Um,
Yep, there's a knee board.
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, it's available to you and you're like, okay, I'm going into this airspace.
Yeah,
All right, I can reference it quick, but it's like, oh, I need to look it up in the far aim. Come on. Like, are you really going to pull out the far aim as you're barreling towards this airspace at 200
sure.
knots? Right.
Yeah, no, I haven't memorized, but I'm always curious, like, how much am I allowed to look at stuff? But anyway, so it's minimum three statute miles, and it's 500 feet under clouds, 1,000 feet above, 2,000 feet horizontal.
All right. Now, what are you going to do if you accidentally end up in IFR conditions? Let's say, you're cruising along and you end up in that condition like you were with your instructor the other day.
Yeah.
It just started pouring down rain, dropped your visibility down to 2 miles. What are you going to do?
So let's say, um, I think the safest thing to do is turn around, make a 180. Um, right now, for if let's say for whatever reason you can't turn around, um, which I don't know why you wouldn't be able to turn around, but let's say it's a fuel issue or whatever, you just find the nearest airport, and I would just put it down like at the nearest airport and just wait for the storm to pass.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
My only concern with that is like you're technically in IFR conditions and trying to land in IFR conditions, not as an instrument rated pilot, can be a pretty difficult thing. I know, the Cirrus, you hit procedure, you hit ILS, you hit activate, you autopilot on, it'll do it. I get
What's the
that.
thing?
I get that. Okay. That's not the appropriate answer.
Sure.
All right. Because that's how people have ended up in dangerous situations. There was somebody that was doing that, not IFR. They were going into like Midway or something. And the
Mhm.
turbulence got bad enough, it kicked off the autopilot and they ended up in a spin because they didn't know
Wow.
how to fly in IFR conditions.
Got it.
So sure, the aircraft is pretty
No,
capable until the autopilot takes a shit, and then you're like,
no.
I don't know what I'm doing.
No, so what I meant is when I turn around 180, my choices are either go back to the airport I came from,
Mhm.
which let's say if it's 400 miles, my fuel may not last that long. So then you find the nearest airport to land it, and that will probably not be an IMC because you're going the other way.
Hopefully, yeah. And if you do get out of IMC conditions, sure, I love it. If you're staying
Mhm.
in the IMC conditions, let's say for some reason this weather it got really bad, it moved way too far away, you ain't got enough gas to get out of IMC conditions. What's your
Sure.
next course of action?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things you can do. Let's say you can't get out of it and you have to fly through it. First thing, you tell ATC and get their help. So they can give you vectors, they can give you lots of information. Let's say you lost all electronic systems. There was a lightning strike, everything went blank, and you're in IMC conditions, like worst possible situation. Um, well, your radio would die too, but let's say the radio's alive, you talk to ATC. You can get a special like VFR clearance to land at an airport, um, but that's also an IMC condition. So, and then as a private pilot, you can only do that during day. I think if at night you need to be instrument rated for a special VFR clearance.
N-
Um,
Now, special VFR, the intention of special VFR is to get you out of IMC conditions.
yeah,
It's to let you take off from an IMC airport and go
yeah,
into VFR conditions. Um, really, what I teach most students is you're going to talk to ATC and you're going to tell them I'm a VFR only pilot and I need vectors to a VFR airport.
Got it.
Hopefully there's one close by.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I know the Cirrus is a very capable aircraft. If it gets bad enough, caps.
I think the most, honestly, I think the most likely situation is, let's say you hit some IMC conditions, based on where or how high the tops are, you can just climb. Um, and this thing goes to 25,000 feet with the stupid mask, but
Yeah.
I think that with the cannulas you can go up to like 18,000, and so there is significant room to, if it's like just a scattered like system, you can go around it, you can go above it. Um, so
Now, the only concern with going above it is VFR on top is still technically an IFR clearance, right?
if it's like a overcast layer, you mean,
If
or
it's
does
an
it matter on what
if
type?
it's an overcast layer, because
Yeah,
remember VFR or VMC conditions is reference to the ground,
sure.
right? Because clouds aren't always level with the ground. They can be slanted up if there's some kind of frontal movement, right? And if you're a VFR pilot and you're looking at your instruments and they show level, but outside you're looking at the clouds, it's like that's not level, and you end up flying around like this. Um,
Got it.
and I do agree that with a Cirrus, if you can punch out of the top of it, a VFR on top is a whole lot better than trying to punch through it under ATC control. Most general aviation airplanes don't have that capability.
Yeah.
To be honest, that the Cirrus SR22 turbo is probably the only thing I would ever even attempt that in a general aviation airplane.
Hmm.
Yay, 3D print is done. All right. Let's get into a little bit of aerodynamics. This is just going to be generic aerodynamics, not necessarily specific to your aircraft. What
Sure.
are flaps good for?
They change the shape of the wing and gives you more lift.
All right. Um, Now, when we're coming in to land, what else are flaps doing for us?
It's allowing us to maintain the same lift at a lower airspeed. Um, um, so in Cirrus, I think the first notch of flaps is mostly lift, and the second notch of flaps is mostly drag. And so it's also acting as an air brake.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Um, Only other thing a DP you might be looking for is they allow us to increase our descent rate without increasing our speed. That's the only other thing a DPE might be listening for. Um, so what happens during a stall, aerodynamically speaking?
Um, the um, wing produces um, lift less than required to maintain the weight of the plane, right? So you've got two forces, up and down. And so suddenly the force going up is getting close to zero. And so you're literally going to start falling, like a rock. Not really like a rock because there's other forces at play, but yeah.
Yeah, you're going to start dropping down. Now, what's happening around the wing when it comes to like the air that's moving around the wing?
For a stall, you mean?
Yeah, for a stall.
Yeah. So so the way you generate lift, let's start there, is there's a curvature, and Bernoulli's principle is where the speed, if you have a differential in speed over, let's say, an airfoil, there's a difference in pressure. So the pressure, as the velocity goes up on a surface, the pressure goes down, and so the pressure under the wing is higher than the pressure above it at ambient atmospheric pressure, and that's how lift is generated. So now in a stall, what ends up happening is there's not enough airflow, or the angle has changed, so the total velocity and therefore the pressure generated has changed, where the amount of it's going to start being equal. So the pressure under the wing and pressure above the wing is now equal, and so the wing is no longer generating lift.
Right. It's a That's a pretty in-depth explanation. To break it down a little simpler, as I reach my critical angle of attack, the smooth laminar airflow over the top of the wing starts to separate and become turbulent, causing the wing to no longer generate enough lift to keep the aircraft aloft. Not saying what you said was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It was all correct.
Yeah.
It's just correct with a lot more words.
Okay. Sure.
Right. And I always say, like, the least words that you can say as possible during a check ride when it comes to answering questions is the less of a chance the DPE can find more things to ask you about. Okay.
Sure.
You've probably seen it in some of my videos, the phrase never miss an opportunity to shut up.
Yeah, that should be your T-shirt. You should sell merch with that.
Never miss an opportunity to shut up, right?
Yeah.
So I normally talk about spins, and you know what? We're gonna bring up spins because again, you're getting a private pilot certificate, not just a Cirrus SR22 Turbo private pilot
Sure.
certificate. So you can go fly anything. So what are the 4 phases of a spin?
Uh, uh, I'm really bad at memorizing things. I'm good at understanding them.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, talk me
so
through a
first thing,
spin then.
sure. So first thing that happens is you stall. So you can't spin without stalling. And so I think they call it the incipient or whatever that, I forget the term. Anyways, I'll just walk you through the actual mechanics of it. So you stall. Usually, one wing stalls more or before the other, and so you're going to have a little dip in one wing. And unless you recover that stall quickly, that's going to then develop into a spin. And so your plane is falling like almost like a leaf would fall, and it's turning around the central axis. Um, and then I can walk you through the recovery of a spin. So you want to pull your power back because you don't want left turning tendencies, or the moment your power is on, the nose is also going to lift. So you don't want the nose to lift and contribute to the stall. So power back, wings level, or not wings level, sorry, aileron level. So you're not like turning it left or right. So just neutral. And then you're pushing rudder in the opposite direction of the spin. And in case you can't see where you're spinning because you're in clouds or whatever, you're disoriented, it's the rudder that's going to give force, not the one that's going to give an easy. So you're the one that's resisting. That's the one you want to push and go all the way. Um, and yeah, and then once it stops spinning, you can level out, put in your power. Um, but that's spin.
Just make sure.
Or in Cirrus, you pull caps.
Yeah, right. Just remember, elevator briskly forward, break the stall.
Yeah.
All right. Just because you've stopped rotating, you've gone from an airplane that's like spinning to an airplane that's just falling. Your angle of attack is still, this. Okay.
Mhm.
So make sure, get the nose down, get that smooth airflow back over the wing. We're not in a fighter jet. We can't power out of a stall.
Mhm.
F-15s, they can power out of stalls. They generate. I've taught a couple people in the ATP CTP course that they were fighter pilots, and they say that the F-16 generates its own relative wind. I'm like, that's kind of funny. It's kind of funny. So your airplane,
Yeah, there the angle of attack doesn't even matter because you can go straight vertical.
it-
It's like a rocket. You're
exactly,
just
it's nuts.
the wings are optional.
The wings are optional. Oh god. So your airplane, it's got fun little doodads at the wingtips. What are those things called?
Um, so are you talking about the different shape of the wing? So one part of it stalls first. So you're
No. What I'm talking about is the this part that sweeps up at the wingtip.
oh at the end of the tip.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They're called winglets.
Okay.
Technically on the Airbus, they're called sharklets for some reason. I don't know why. But they're called winglets. What are they doing for us?
Are they just changing the? So I don't know. I'm just speculating here, just based on physics. But the plane.
Is that
Okay, sorry.
no, you're fine.
Someone just came and the dogs were like, "It is my solemn duty to bark as much as I can."
I must
Okay,
protect
so
the
the wingtip.
house.
Yeah. I'm guessing they're changing the shape of the wing bec- to generate less like turbulence because of like the vortices at the tip of the wing, but
Yes.
it's a speculation.
No, that's exactly what it's doing, right? Because we know we've got the way we generate lift, as we talked about already. We've got the high pressure under the wing, low pressure on top of the wing, relatively. For all you people that
Hmm.
want to say say stuff in the comments. Uh,
Yeah.
so at the wing tip, those high pressure and low pressure forces want to come together, and they make that little
Hmm.
tornado. Well, those winglets, they help push that little tornado a little bit farther out. They help
Hmm.
prevent the high pressure from bleeding right on top of the wing. Instead, it
Hmm.
bleeds together a little bit farther back, helps reduce our induced drag. Okay,
Okay.
so that's where that's one of the things in a Cirrus that helps you get that 170 knot cruise speed.
Yeah.
Um, okay, I absolutely those the God, the Cirrus is such a wonderful airplane, right? So you brought up left turning tendencies already. Technically, the FAA doesn't call them left turning tendencies anymore. They call them turning tendencies because they're not always
Yeah.
going to the left.
Sure.
So what are the turning tendencies?
Um, yeah, so you've got your P factor, you've got gyroscopic precession, you've got I'm really bad at remembering names. Um, I should write these down. But I can walk you through them. For example, P factor is just tell me to shut up if you
Mhm.
don't want to know.
No, you're fine. Continue on.
Sure. Um, so when the angle of attack increases, um, the right part of the blade um, generates more. How do I explain this? The angle is different, and so the lift generated is different, and therefore, because there's now a discrepancy in sort of lift generation, it turns to the left. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's it, right? The descending blade, as you tilt the airplane up, the descending blade now gets a greater angle of attack to the relative wind than the ascending blade, causing it to generate more lift. And since it's sideways, we call it thrust.
Hmm.
All right. What can you tell me about torque then?
Yeah. So um, torque is um, how do I explain this? Actually, no. I understand torque, but it's like I don't know how to explain it.
Well, it's
Um,
Newton's third law, right? For every action, there's an equal yet opposite reaction.
mhm.
Prop spinning to the right, airplane trying to twist to the left. That's it.
A nice simple way to explain it.
Yeah.
I'm just overthinking it in my head.
It's it's super simple, right? It's super simple. Um, now, what about gyroscopic precession? That's one of the more complex ones. Can you talk me through that turning tendency?
Yeah, so the gyroscopic principle is, a body that's spinning is going to resist motion, resist external forces being applied to it. So because the prop is spinning, and because of the direction it's spinning, it's causing the plane, um, it wants to stay steady, and that causes a left turning tendency.
So, what you're thinking of is rigidity in space.
Okay.
That's that gyroscopic principle that you're thinking of, rigidity in space. That's how old school attitude and heading indicators work. Okay.
Okay.
Um, Gyroscopic precession, it's like a bicycle tire. Right. I see you got a motorcycle helmet back there. So you kind of understand like your tires eventually become gyros, right? They're a
Yeah.
spinning object with mass.
Hmm.
So when you
Hmm.
apply a torque to it, what gyroscopic precession states, in completely out of the context of anything that we're actually talking about, gyroscopic
Hmm.
precession just states that when you have a spinning object with mass that you apply a torque to, the resultant force is felt 90 degrees in the direction of rotation. Okay. So
Hmm.
let's think back to the motorcycle. When we turn a motorcycle, we don't turn with the handlebars, we lean, right?
Hmm.
When we lean over, that's applying a torque to the axle that effectively applies a torque to the spinning object with mass, the tire.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's felt 90 degrees in the direction of rotation, which is rotating forward. So it's pushing on the
Hmm.
nose of the motorcycle, allowing us to turn. Yeah, I know motorcycles can be a little bit more complex. We got counter
Hmm.
steer and all that other jazz. But basic principle.
Got it.
We tilt a bicycle it's felt 90 degrees in the direction of rotation. It lets us turn. Now, when we put that into the context of a propeller blade, right,
Mhm.
that thing's up there spinning to the right. It's a spinning object with mass. When we pitch up, we are
Mhm.
applying a torque to the hub, which
Mhm.
applies that force to the propeller blade. It's like I'm grabbing the top of the propeller. Now,
Mhm.
since it's a spinning object with mass, precession
Mhm.
states that resultant force is going to be 90 degrees in the direction of rotation. It actually
Mhm.
pulls on the right side or pushes on the left side. It's a right turning tendency when you pitch up.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
That's why we don't call them that's why we don't call them left turning tendencies anymore, because
Yeah.
like, I mean, to be honest, it's not accurate.
Yeah.
So gyroscopic precession, spinning object with mass, apply a torque to it, felt 90 degrees in the direction of rotation. All right, let's talk about some aeromedical factors for a second. Um, what kind of checklist would you run through to make sure that you are safe to go fly?
This is the I'm safe checklist.
All right, and what are the items on it?
So, illness, if I'm sick or whatever, medication. So, NyQuil, Sudafed, don't fly with all of those. Anything that makes you sleepy, anything that's not approved. Which surprisingly is a lot of medications aren't approved. I was so surprised to see. Um, and rightly so. Um, Sleep. Have I had enough sleep? Um, um, what's a alcohol? I don't really drink, so it doesn't really apply to me. But alcohol. Uh, F is for fatigue, how tired I am, how much exhaustion, and then last is emotion. So did I just have a really bad day and I want to go kill myself? Which I bet has happened. I'm sure there's like one case of someone just got divorced or something and just flew and crashed. I don't know, but
Actually, it happens a whole lot more likely than than you'd think. It's kind of
yeah.
sad. So the only thing was the S is stress, not sleep. Uh, Sleep and fatigue, kind of the same thing. Stress, not just emotional stress, but physical stress. Right? If you just got done working out, your brain and your body use the same thing for fuel, protein. Now, dumb
Mhm.
brain that's evolved over thousands of years. It's going to focus more on repairing your muscles than feeding your brain. So if you just, went and blasted your biceps and did, 400-pound squat for an hour or something, I don't know. Uh,
Yeah.
your body's going to be sending all of its resources to repairing the muscle damage, not to your brain. Um, right. Alcohol, as you said, right.
Mhm.
Don't really drink, but what's the limits? Like, just what's the legal limits?
Yeah, it's funny. This is one of the questions I got wrong in my exam, and I was like, oh, it doesn't really apply to me, but it's 0.04 plus 8 hours plus not under effects of any. So it's not just a time. The effects also don't. Um,
Right. Including hangover, right? Because
yeah.
alcohol, let's be honest, it just borrows happiness from tomorrow. Um,
Yeah, no, I
and the
agree.
hangover
Stop drinking.
is the result, right? So let's talk about hypoxia. Hypoxia is actually a pretty big deal in your airplane, given that it can actually get up to the altitudes where hypoxia is a genuine concern. So what are the four different types of hypoxia?
Um, so I don't remember the names, but I'll describe them to you. So one is just lack of oxygen because of the air. One is the carbon monoxide poisoning. One is the inability of your oxygen to bind to the red blood cells. So just um, for anemic patients or other types of patients. Um, what's the last one? I forget. But yeah, those
Okay.
are
So
those are the types.
we've got hypoxic hypoxia. That's that lack of pressure, right? Because our
Yeah.
lungs, they function based on pressure, right? Because we all know
Mhm.
that the portion, right? The proportions don't change as we go up in the atmosphere, right? We're no matter
Mhm.
if we're at 18,000 feet or 8,000 feet or 2,000 feet, there's still going to be about 29% oxygen, and the remainder is like nitrogen, and then like
Yeah.
1% of weird shit. Um, so hypoxia is due to the lack of pressure. Like, it's how people pass out on top of Mount Everest,
Mhm.
right? Then we got hypemic. That's that CO2 poisoning, right?
Yeah.
That's also the same kind of. That's also the inability of your blood cells to carry the oxygen. Okay,
Mhm.
so those are two in the same, because the carbon monoxide binds to your red blood cells, whether it be your red blood cells are damaged and they can't carry um, oxygen, or there's something else bound to them preventing them from carrying oxygen, still hypemic. Then we've got stagnant. This is G forces, the fighter jets, but also it's, I sat on my foot for too
Yeah.
long, or I was sitting too long and now my butt's numb.
Mm-hmm.
That's technically stagnant hypoxia. Then we have histotoxic. This is like continuous damage. This is that buddy that, chain smokes like a chimney.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody poisoned, like alcohol poisoning, right? This is damage to your cells. This is damage to the tissues, so that when the oxygen gets to the tissues, they can't even use it when it gets there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The reason it's important to know the different kinds is, well, what the cures are different, right? So if you've got somebody who's hypoxia, we just give them oxygen and they'll be fine, probably.
Yeah, no, I have a whole thing I put in the plane here.
Okay.
So I would just go over this kind of checklist of what's wrong with you.
That
And
is
so
that is awesome. That is awesome.
that's
Now,
like one of those cards, the commercial planes have in case of emergency. But it's
yeah, what's wrong with you?
yeah.
Now, I see you had hyperventilation on that card. So what's your recommendations for hyperventilation?
Yeah, so I think it used to be breathe into a bag, but let's say if you don't have a bag, or it's, you get someone to do an activity that takes up their brain, so they stop freaking out. So, it's sing a song that requires slowing down. um, Wheels on the bus go round and round is probably a good one.
Yeah.
Um, Hallelujah might be another one.
Mm.
It's long, deep breaths.
I like row,
Well,
row, row your
slow deep
boat.
breaths, they don't need more oxygen, but they're really slowing down. Yeah. Um, so that if you're hyperventilating, that's the
Awesome.
response.
Awesome. Now, what's the requirement for oxygen in your aircraft? Or, well, in any aircraft? Like, what's the requirements for oxygen?
Yeah, so the requirements are if you're above 12,500 feet for a cumulative period of 30 minutes or more, you have to use oxygen. I think over 14,000 feet, um, crew must use oxygen. Um, I think, and then there are recommendations for day and night usage. So at night usage, they want, it's not a requirement, it's a recommendation, but I guess it's a strong recommendation where they want you using oxygen. I think at 6,000 feet at night. Also, I would say if someone is a chain smoker, you probably want to put them on oxygen sooner, or they have other medical conditions.
Awesome. Awesome. The only thing you missed was that everyone needs oxygen above 15,
Okay,
right? The recommendations, you got the night one close. It's 5, not 6.
fine.
The day is 10.
Okay.
Okay. Do you know why the night is so much lower?
Yeah, because your brain has to do a lot more work to process vision at night, so it uses more oxygen.
Awesome. Yep. And for some reason, our brains and our eyeballs don't provide us the sensation to breathe more like working our muscles do. If you go for a run, you
Yeah.
get the sensation that you need to breathe more. That's why you don't pass out when you run. But for some reason, your brain and your eyeballs don't. Let's go through some hazardous attitudes. So we got anti-authority. What's the cure for anti-authority?
Um, I'm not special or different, and
Right.
so go follow the rules.
Yeah, the only thing I like to add to anti-authority, follow the rules is, follow the rules. They're usually written in somebody else's blood. Because remember, the FAA is a very reactive agency. They are not a proactive agency. They react to tragedy by making new regulations, which means this regulation probably exists because somebody got hurt or died. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what about impulsivity? What's the cure for impulsivity?
Slow down. Follow the checklists.
Yeah, not so fast. Think the thing I keep in mind, is I learned this from basic training. My drill sergeant used to tell me, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So slow it down, do it smoothly, and you can eventually do it fast. Okay, but don't worry about doing it fast is not the priority. Okay, invulnerability. What's the cure for invulnerability?
Um, I'm not invulnerable, and so accidents happen to everyone, and so really, yeah, stop
Yeah,
thinking I'm above it.
yeah, exactly. It could happen to you. I know I
Mhm.
went through my first two engine failures and made it to pavement on both of them. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm good. I ain't never going to end up in the dirt. Like I fell victim to this. Right. And,
Third one, you're in the dirt.
and then the third one, I was in the dirt. I'm like, God, I guess it can happen. And now I don't fly other people's dumpy airplanes. Um,
I will say that speaking of landing in the dirt, I guess in training, what they really don't emphasize is how different i- flying environments are. Like for example, where I fly in Southern California, it is so densely populated that if I lost an engine and my plane didn't have a parachute, I would be in serious trouble because all the highways are packed with traffic. So good luck trying to, put it down on a highway. There's hills and mountains and terrain everywhere, and so even if you find a golf course, you're really looking at little hills on a golf course, and so it's really hard to find a field, like if you're flying in these densely populated places, and like I don't know, it's like I would be very scared of like trying to find a field to land in Southern California,
yeah,
like
yeah.
by the coast.
I
Like
mean,
water might be a much better option to put it down on. Um, or like right at the beach, like that area, rather than trying to put it down. I think because there are no fields.
yeah, no. I mean, a beach would definitely be my first choice. Water?
Yeah.
Oh, hell no. Do you know what happens to water? Do you know what happens to airplanes with gear when they try to land in the water?
No.
They flip over.
Really?
Yeah, they
Wow.
flip forward. Because the gear catches. Remember, water's
Yeah.
not compressible, right? So
Yeah.
when you hit that water
You're
doing,
really.
80, and a lot of people their seatbelts aren't tough enough, so they end up in the ceiling. Cracking their skull open, breaking their neck. Like a lot of
Wow.
people don't survive it. Even seaplanes that land in the water with their gear down. Like I just talked to somebody. He did a gear down landing in the water in his Sea Ray, which is it's a small little seaplane. All he
Hmm.
remembers is what it felt like was getting punched in the face and then waking up with water
Wow.
up to his neck.
Right. Avoid
All
water.
right. Water is not. I know Sully made it look so easy. When he put the Airbus in the water. He made it look so easy. We all should go try. No, no. Um, but no, if you are not in a seaplane, do not aim for the water. If you have retractable gear, you might do a little bit better.
Hmm.
But again, you've still got the prop that's going to start cutting up through the water. It's going to catch. And again, you're very likely going to end up on your nose. So a beach in California would definitely be
Wow.
my first bet when if I needed somewhere to land. Just don't hit the sea lions. I've heard they're big.
Or people. Beaches are crowded with people.
Yeah, um, and probably a bunch of people napping too, so they
Yeah.
wouldn't even notice. Awesome, awesome. Now let's get into uh, some sky vector. All right, what can you tell me what your route might be for your cross country? Just
Sure.
airport from and to. I don't necessarily need the whole
Sure. So it's from KSNA, which is John Wayne,
KSNA.
to Henderson, Nevada.
What's that one? KHND.
Um, yeah, I think it's HND. I can look it up one
That's
second.
it. Yep. I've been there before. I got caught in some pretty bad downdrafts coming back from there one time in a Cessna 172, and I was at VY, um, full power and still descending at like 800 feet per minute.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. I was with a student and everything, and like I'm looking at the student, I'm like, I don't know about this, man. Like you want to call your mom real quick? We made it though, because I'm here. All right. So can you see what I'm looking at?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So this is where we're taking off from. What airspace are you in? You should probably know this by now.
Yeah, we're in Charlie.
Charlie
South Charlie.
airspace. Um, now, why is this airport purple and your airport blue?
So that's towered and untowered,
All right, towered and
non-towered.
untowered. Awesome. Um,
What's the word? Is it untowered or non-towered?
uncontrolled
Uncontrolled. Okay.
would be the way that I would explain it. Now, what runways? Well, you know what? That's not really fair because that's your home airport. Let's see. What's this little star mean?
It's the beacon. So there's a rotating beacon.
There's a beacon available at this field. Awesome. I'm adjusting the size of this so that it matches a little better for you. Now, what is this airspace right here?
Delta.
Up to what altitude?
2699.
Awesome. What is this little flag here?
It's like a visual checkpoint. So if you're landing at that airport, they'll usually be like, "Hey," they expect you to kind of, if you're VFR, kind of know the checkpoints around an airport.
Yep. And ATC knows where they are. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the big deal. Cause like if you go to Arizona, you know, around the Phoenix Sky Harbor area, there's a lot of like known waypoints when you start talking to people. You're like, oh yeah, that's the witch's hat, that's the gap, but they're not labeled on any sectional because ATC doesn't know what they are. So if you're like, hey ATC, I need vectors, I'm over near the witch's hat, they'll be like, the what? Okay.
Yeah.
The fact that they have flags is, you know, ATC knows about them. Okay. What is this?
So it's a restricted, unpaved, or private. Like, is it like it's an unpaved airport?
This is just a closed airport. It's
Okay,
got an X
closed
on it.
airport.
It's a closed airport, but it's still identifiable from the air as an
Okay.
airport. So it prevents you from landing on it, right? Because you're like, you look down and be like, that looks like an airport. And then you look at your sectional, it's like, oh, actually, that's closed. Okay, they didn't dig up all the runways and whatnot. It's just a closed airport. Right? What's this?
Acrobatic activity.
Awesome. So if I'm flying on this side of the airport, am I pretty much going to be clear of that, or does it not matter?
Let's see. So
Yep.
I'm gonna be clear of that.
Yeah, so the when you see these, that's the side of the airport that they should be on. Okay.
Got it.
What's this little star next to this L mean?
So it's lighted. So L stands for lighting. Like night lights for the airport, and the star is usually like there's some special like requirements. Maybe you need to like turn on the lights with your kind of radio.
It's pilot controlled lighting. That's what it
Pilot
means.
control, yeah.
Just means it's pilot controlled. Right. Is there any runways at this airport that aren't left traffic?
Yeah, so that RP means right pattern. So 26 would be right pattern.
All right. And what's the longest runway? Or how long is the longest runway at this field?
4,500 feet.
Awesome. Right. And what is this? This VR 1257, VR 1217.
These Victor errors.
So V8, these ones are Victor Airways. These ones.
Oh, are these the military kind of like airways?
Military training routes.
Yeah.
Yep, military training routes. Can I use, so these are visual training routes. That's why it's V. If they were instrument, it'd be an I. So can I use these? Like they're visual routes. If we look along them, there's a lot of visual waypoints that make it real easy to navigate by. Can I use them?
I wouldn't.
No, you definitely should not, because, again, military aircraft, they're not too worried about speed, right? What's this?
I know this. This is a dried lake bed.
Sometimes water is, it's a dry lake bed, sometimes water. Given it's California, it seems like it's always not water. They might as well. They might as well just take them away because, I don't think they're ever going to get any more water. As sad as that is. So if I am right here over these towers, right?
Sure.
What radial am I on from the Hector VOR? So here's the towers, here's the VOR. Just
Sure.
a
So you're
good
like
estimate.
230 roughly.
Yep, about
Like
230.
232, yeah.
All right. Now, if I wanted to track to this VOR, what would I put in my CDI?
So you just do the inverse of that. So you do 232 minus 180, and that's your.
Awesome. Or in your Cirrus, you just twist it till it lines up with your airplane, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's technology is a beautiful thing.
It is. I absolutely love it. I've had to do ILSs to minimums in a 6-pack with swinging needles and no ILS and no HSI. It is an entirely different animal. It is an entirely different animal. Okay.
I think the new Cirruses don't even have a compass anymore. They've actually removed the compass.
How do they get away with that?
The heading indicator is accurate enough where they've gotten permission to remove the compass. So there's no more like compass deviation card. There's not a
Oh.
physical compass in the plane.
See, because that's hilarious because like the Airbus has a compass and like it's you could almost think of the Airbus as like the Cirrus of the airliner world.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's like tucked up into you actually have to pull it down to see it. Like so many people even forget that there's one in there. But that is kind of a big deal. What
Yeah.
is this right here? This purple with the lines pointing in.
It's a more military operations area.
All right. Do you need a clearance to enter this?
No.
No. What about this restricted area? Can you go in here?
Nope.
Can I get a clearance?
Probably not. I'll tell you,
But
you're crazy.
there's an option, right? I could ask.
You can ask.
um.
I mean,
all
that's right, like Area 51 area, so you're probably not getting in
Oh,
there.
I didn't realize
I'm
that was
guessing.
Area 51. I was just
No,
like,
I'm just guessing, but it's like that Nevada like test zone
yeah,
area.
yeah. Oh, I was just like, oh yeah. What is it? All right. What's this? Have you
Yeah,
seen
so
this?
these are, yeah, I actually flew over it. It was quite cool.
Yeah.
So it's like a solar farm, but like there's a lot of glare coming off the solar panels.
So this one's not a solar farm in that context. All right. So don't overfly this ever again because it's really dangerous. What this
Okay.
actually is, I'll find a picture of it. All right.
Sorry, give me 1 second. My
Yeah, no
dog
problem.
is very unhappy outside now. Here's the other one.
All right. So this is what those were. All right. And what is going on here is these aren't solar panels, these are mirrors.
Ah,
All right. So what they're doing is they're reflecting the sun up here and it's heating up this like molten salt core. And the salt is melting and then boiling water and spinning a turbine and whatnot. I don't know why it's salt, but either way, these are not solar panels. And if you end up in the wrong area or like one of these mirrors, because you can see a couple of them aren't
yeah.
lined up appropriately. All right. And one of these mirrors starts pointing at your airplane, you're very likely going to blind yourself. Um,
Correct.
or if you end up in kind of the concentration area,
Yeah.
you could overheat your airplane. And given that yours is composite, you start overheating the surfaces of a composite airplane. What happens?
Uh,
Delamination.
yeah.
All right. So fly next to it. Sure. Have fun. Don't overfly these.
Is this the one next to Jean Airport? I'm trying to think if this is the specific one I flew over.
this is the one.
Yeah, this was the one actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, this
So
was the one.
yeah, try not to do that anymore.
Okay.
And again, a cloudy day, it's probably not a big deal. Bright sunny day, I'd be a little concerned about overheating the laminations on an airplane, of a composite
All right.
airplane. Uh, what is this right here?
It's a wildlife area, we gotta stay or recommended 2,000 feet ATL above it.
Awesome. Awesome. What kind of equipment do I need to operate out of this airport?
Um, okay, so let's see. So this would be um, so you're not in the class Bravo. Um, so starting from ground 0 to is it 700 or 1200 in this case? Would be class G. Um, what is that red dotted line?
Oh, it's a
Uh,
isogonic line.
oh, okay. So I mean, you are in the mod C kind of whale of Vegas's, and so you need the ADSB out and a mod C transponder.
Awesome. Awesome. Right. Just because you're not in the Bravo, you still need those pieces of equipment because of the mode C veil. It's also within the lateral boundaries of Bravo. So if the Bravo juts outside of the mode C veil, it very rarely happens. But just because you're outside of the mode C veil doesn't mean you don't need the equipment. You still need it if you are within the lateral boundaries of
Got it.
Bravo. All right.
Yeah, I actually flew into that airport. It's a cool, cute little airport.
Oh, Gene.
Yeah, it was my
Oh,
first really hardcore crosswind pattern work. Woo, that was intense.
what was the crosswind?
So I think it was 15, and I was with an instructor, and even more than landing, just like maintaining the pattern was really hard because I kept getting blown off, like the turn to base or the turn to final. They were like some of the worst turns I'd ever made. Um, like I because there's two runways at Gene, and I would literally get blown on the other runway. Now it's a non-towered airport; it was empty, but I was like so embarrassed. I was like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, and
Like,
that's what training is for, right? Don't ever be embarrassed about fucking something up in training. Um, I start every lesson with every student. Doesn't matter if it's an airline student or a private pilot student. I start it all with "Let's go fuck something up." Okay, because if we did it all perfectly, we didn't learn anything,
yeah.
right? Um, and I realized the reason I started doing that is because I had a student. They made it from 0 to private pilot in 30 days. Every lesson was perfect. I never had to correct anything. 0 to private pilot in 30 days, even check ride complete. They
Hmm.
went on to instrument and they were lost. Right? Asking them to start to they had a perfect rote level of knowledge, but given that they never experienced anything wrong, they never made any mistakes, they never got to apply anything, right? So
Hmm.
never be embarrassed about getting something wrong, doing something wrong, making mistakes in flight training. That's the whole point of training. What's this big blue number?
So this is terrain clearance in that like area.
All right, in this grid. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we look, like here's the grid. All right. Just be glad your DPE is not going to ask you to like find like give me the grid coordinates of this airport by using the Latin long.
Mhm.
My
Does
DPE
that
made
happen
me
in
do.
instrument or commercial?
No, my DPE made, or my examiner made me do it in private pilot.
Oh wow.
So it was rough. I mean I got it, but it was rough.
Mhm.
Okay. Any ooh, what's this one? I like these. What's this black kind of shaded black circle with the black lettering?
Ooh, I haven't seen that before. I mean, usually the black box is like the radar area, um, um, right?
Yep.
So is that the same, just in a circle here?
Yeah, it's a TERSA, right? It's a
Yeah.
it's a terrain it's a traffic radar service area.
Oh, you mean the box around Palm? Okay,
Yeah,
or
so
the
the
circle around Palm
yeah,
Springs?
the circle around Palm Springs with the black and the black, right?
Got it.
Um am I required to talk to anybody if I'm out here at 4,000 feet?
Okay, so let's look at this. 4,000 feet, you would be above Palm Springs. You would be so 2,000 to 10,000. What airspace is that? That's the Tursa airspace. So you talk to Tursa, the ADC.
I can. Am I required
Yeah.
to?
Um, yeah. I mean, wouldn't you fall between 2,000 and 10,000 at 4,000?
Yes, but terses are not mandatory.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, not mandatory. Obviously, don't be a dick,
Yeah.
but not mandatory. Um,
Yeah, honestly, I've just not experienced the don't talk to anyone because like all my flying has been you absolutely must talk to. And like so I've honestly not even flown like without talking to people. I just it's so much easier, safer for my nerves to like have someone there.
yeah, and I mean that's perfect, right? Because that could get us right into like the next question. Like, what do you view as personal minimums, right? You experienced 15 knot crosswind. Would you be okay in a 15 knot crosswind on your own?
No,
No. So
not
what?
by choice. I mean, if I had to, because it was an emergency, sure, I could
Yeah,
probably put it down, but no, I wouldn't.
you
I
wouldn't
wouldn't let
plan on
that.
it, right?
No,
Um,
I think 7 or 8 is probably like my limit right now.
okay. Now, what other personal minimums might you have?
Yeah, so I've kept it very safe. I don't want to be like the other idiot Cirrus pilots. And so my don't fly at night. I think that's an easy one as a private pilot. I know I'm allowed to, but it's it's not really worth it. Even with all the automation and GPS at my level, at least, I wouldn't um, fly in questionable weather, even though I could, like with the Fiki system and so forth. It's just it's not worth it. Um, um, the what else do I have it written down somewhere?
Oh, that's awesome that you've got them written down.
Yeah, as part of my like check ride binder prep, I wrote them down. Yeah, I think another kind of unusual one that I do is I don't like if I'm trying to go to like let's say tomorrow I'm going to go to Palo Alto and it's like the first time I'm going into Northern California airspace. Like my personal minimum is I'm never going to do it alone for the first time. And so if I'm going to like a new area, I'm just going to like go with a DP, not DP, sorry, a CFI, for the first time or maybe even 2 times, just to learn the space, the visual checkpoints, like all the stuff that they say, yo, go here, do this. And I'm like, what? um, uh, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's that. To be honest, that's not bad. When um I try not to go on long journeys alone, even if it's not necessarily a pilot. Like when I brought my airplane home, I brought it from Kansas to Green Bay. It was
Mm.
9 hours of flying. I brought my buddy Mo with me. We deployed together, so I knew if we did crash, he at least knows how to put on a tourniquet.
Yeah.
Right? Um, but not flying at night. I don't fly at night single engine,
Yeah.
so that's not even that big of a deal, right? I've had people like, "Let's go fly." No, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like I'm done.
Yeah.
Uh,
Especially with these pistons, right? Like you don't really want to fly a piston at night. And because I have flown with at night quite a few times with instructors, and man, it is hard to tell like where the ground is, like where can you put it down. Like
yeah,
it's hard.
yeah. I mean, I've made it back to the pattern as nightfall happened once, and I'm like, ooh, this has been a while. Like I don't really like this. And I mean, I went around. It was my personal airplane. I a couple hundred hours in my personal airplane, and I went around once or twice just to make sure. Um, my landing light was also burnt out, so that wasn't great. It's a seaplane. Every time I put it in the water, the damn landing light burns out. So I just stopped replacing it. All right, let's get into a little bit of weather, and then we'll call it a day on this one. Let me just pull up. What website should I go to for weather?
So aviation weather. I usually so I'll walk you through what I've done. I've actually called the guys a few times. They're so happy that someone called because apparently no one calls.
Nobody calls anymore. I still do.
Yeah. They have their website too where you can get the electronic briefing. You can file a flight plan. I've done that a few times. Um, or for flight. Um, for flight gets its data from these guys anyways. So
Hmm.
same thing.
So, what would you call the most accurate weather report.
Pirate.
Pirate. You've seen the videos.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. Here's
So
a
the
pirate.
decoding a pirate is a different question. Let's see.
Yeah.
So this is United Airlines, 142, and then so that's the airline. I'm guessing number of the airline, the plane.
No, I don't think that's it
No?
actually. UA is just a normal pirate.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't
Um,
read the decode.
yeah, we're not worried about decoding them too much, right? We're worried about like where they were at and what we actually experienced.
Yeah, so turbulence. TB's turbulence. You've got your wind before that. So you've got wind coming from 240 and 38 knot winds. Turbulence.
Smooth.
SMTH. I'm not sure what that is.
Smooth. Saying there's no turbulence.
Okay, so it's the negative. Okay, so
yeah.
Turbulence not.
Yep.
Got it.
And the reason this one's getting reported is because it's right above Salt Lake City, so we're near the Rocky Mountains. Over the last few months, there's been some severe mountain waves. So ATC's asking for PIREPs to make sure that the mountain waves are gone. And you may look at this and go, "That's flight level 371. Like what?
Yeah.
What am I doing with this information? That's stupid, right?" Well, if they're not getting turbulence up at that altitude, the mountain waves aren't necessarily like there's probably not going to be any mountain waves, so there's probably not going to be much turbulence down at altitudes where you might be operating. Okay. Well, you and your Cirrus getting up to what, 24,000?
They say it does, but I don't think in terms of personal minimums, like that's another one I have is I'm not really taking it anywhere close to that because the probability of something going wrong is just
way too high.
Yeah. No, I keep it at like where I don't need oxygen. Like that's my personal minimum is like, keep it like 12,000 or under and that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I got a buddy that has an airplane like mine, but he has the turboed one, and it technically puts its service ceiling at 19,000. But he's like, why? Like, why would I? Yeah. Why am I going to take a seaplane up to 19,000?
Another scam they do is they advertise all the air speeds when they're trying to sell you a plane at that 25,000. Which is so not true because you're never really going to fly an unpressurized cabin at 25,000.
No,
right? It's just so.
Yeah. Can you get that thing pressurized?
No.
No, there is no pressurization options.
No, I think on the Pipers, right? There was where you could convert it, but no, not on the Cirrus.
Yeah,
apparently the fuselage, just the way they've built it, cannot be pressurized, so they would have to redo the fuselage.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's not really worth it at that point. I know, yeah, there was some Pipers. I think the DA62 can be pressurized, and it's about the same price as the Cirrus, isn't it?
Slightly more.
Yeah.
That's the twin engine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Twin piston. Yeah.
Yep, twin piston that uses you can put Jet A in it.
Yeah.
Even though it's
that's FADEC. That actually has FADEC.
Yeah. Is that the upgrade plane when you get your multi-engine?
No. I'm thinking maybe a turboprop like a M500 or M600.
Yeah, I mean that'd be nice. Just look into the insurance requirements. Because that stuff
500 hours.
500 hours, and then a lot of them like they require like annual training too.
Oh yeah.
It's nuts. Like my airplane, the moment I hit, I think it's 60, they require me to go back for annual training. Now, don't get me wrong, I got a couple of years between here and there. But a lot of people sell them.
There's certainly the law of diminishing returns when it comes to price. These planes, right? The faster they go, like the price increases exponentially, but the speed increases linearly.
Yeah.
And at some point, you're just like, dude, this is like just not worth it.
No, it's not worth it. Then there was
like even if you can afford it, it's like there's a part of your brain which is like you're lighting money on fire.
Yeah. Buy a seaplane, right? You might as well. People say if it flies or floats, rent it. I fucked off and got something that did both.
There's a third part to that.
Yeah, I like to leave that one out.
Yeah, just pointing it out.
Yeah. This is supposed to be a family-friendly street or family-friendly. All right, so we're looking at some weather. I don't like that one. All right. Oh, that one kind of sucks too.
You're trying to find one with lots of remarks.
Yeah, I'm trying to find one that kind of it's like um
See, I'm from Southern California. All my tasks look clear, no problem. I haven't even seen most of these remarks on a TAF before. But yeah, that's right.
MDA, is that the one I'm looking for? No, come
You know,
on.
you could probably try mine because there is a
Okay.
storm coming tomorrow.
All right.
So try KSNA.
KSNA.
Yeah.
Awesome. When would you expect the lowest ceiling?
Okay, so let's just see. 7 overcast at 1100. From so you've got broken at 2000, overcast 2000. So the low ceiling is right now. So the first one.
Awesome. Awesome. Trying to find one down in Florida. And I just can't remember any of them to say. That's one. And it's clear in Florida for the first time ever.
Cape Pi. That's a nice airport name.
I forget the name. It's Allegiant operates out of there. It's the only reason I know it. All right, let's look at this chart. All right. Now, a lot of students look at this chart and they're like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? So I'm not necessarily asking you like, hey, what do you expect over here? What do you expect over here?
Mhm.
How would you include this chart in your aeronautical decision making on whether or not you're going to go or not go?
Yeah, so this is a prognostic chart. It's kind of telling the future. So it's talking about not the present, but where things will go. And so you're looking at front systems, right? So for me, Southern California on the bottom left, you see a L, which is a low pressure system. Low pressure systems are associated usually with bad weather, maybe thunderstorms. And so, which makes sense because there's bad weather coming tomorrow. And so, no surprise, there's a low pressure system.
Awesome, right? And you're starting to see that weather as we
Yep.
start to increase. And look, there it is, 24 hours from now,
Mhm.
precipitation, right? What I like to think of these is kind of like a long-term plan, big picture plan. When you start, especially in your airplane, since you got some decent range and you got some decent speed to do it at,
Mhm.
um, using these to kind of plan your route, to try and avoid weather. Especially, for you, it's probably not going to be big deal because you're like, oh, it's my airplane. I'm only going to
Mhm.
fly when it's enjoyable to fly it. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna, I'm not gonna fly in shitty weather,
Yeah.
even if there's the chance of it. But when I was ferrying airplanes, when I ferried an airplane from the tip of Florida way up to here, um, it was long, right? So I'm looking at prog charts to be like, okay, if I see right now, well, it's going to take me about 6 to 9 hours to do the flight. So if I'm looking through these two different areas, looks like I'm going to have some high pressure. There might be some rain, but I'm seeing those isobars start to separate. So the weather should start to get better the closer I get, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, Makes sense. Awesome.
Yeah.
Mm. Where's the freezing level in Northern California? In this one, the one to the right.
And the one on the right.
Yep.
Um, so ceiling
No.
1,000 to 3,000 feet.
Freezing
No,
level.
freezing level. So above mean sea level, freezing at sea level. So the line says, I think I can read it. It's 080 and 040.
Yep. We
Close.
got 080 on this line. So what would
Yeah,
that?
so 8,000 feet.
8,000 feet, right? And in your airplane, that's not really a big deal. At 8,000 feet, turn on the Fiki.
Yeah. Yeah, or just go to 9,000.
Yeah. Or just go above it,
Sorry,
right?
not 9,000. Stay under 8,000. Or turn on 50.
Yep. Awesome. Awesome. Now, let's go back. When it came to the boxed items on
Mm-hmm.
the emergency checklist,
Yeah.
I'd really try to have those box items memorized verbatim. All right. I know when I did
Okay.
stage checks for UND, I had a little printout that I would give students, and all it had was V speeds and emergencies. And I'd just be like, fill this out. That was the start of the check ride, right?
Got it.
It wasn't even any, we'd go through the whole script that I went through at the beginning, and then I'd hand them that worksheet and come back in 30 minutes,
Yeah.
right? If they couldn't come up with at least 80% of them, we were starting to have conversations on whether or not the check ride was going to continue. Okay, so
Got it.
having those things down verbatim is really important. Uh, you had a solid understanding of all of your systems though, which is great, especially on such a complex aircraft. You know, I've had students have much less of an understanding of their systems. You know, in a Cessna 172 from the 70s, you know, as a 50, 60 page POH. You know, when you've got an
Yeah.
over 300 page POH and you've got a solid understanding of your systems. So really good on that one. Your V speeds, they were a little weak on the top end, but you don't spend much time up there at the top end. So they're not right there in front of you every day.
Yeah.
And again, you know, you've got such a fancy set of avionics. I promise the airplane's going to yell at you if you try to exceed those limitations.
Yeah.
Um, so I was pretty happy with those. Airworthiness, you were solid on what documents you need, what inspections you need. Wasn't too
Mhm.
bad. Uh, you kind of lapsed on the TCDS and the STCs when it came to looking for like broken items and whether or not the aircraft's still
Mhm.
airworthy. Because remember, it's not just your Cirrus. It's, you know, you could go buy a, yeah, I don't know, a Mooney or a Bonanza or what have you.
Mhm.
Um, and those things are a lot older. So they're going to have, you know, more ADs. They're going to have more STCs that might be applied to it, right?
Mhm.
Um, your privileges and limitations, you were pretty solid on. Special VFR, there was a little misunderstanding on it. You know, it's where am I getting special VFR? I'm getting special VFR to leave an airport, not necessarily getting special VFR to go into an airport, right? Because landing in shitty conditions is a whole lot worse than taking off in shitty conditions, right?
Got it.
A whole lot less to risk associated with going up as opposed to going down. Okay.
Sure.
Um, weather was pretty good. Aerodynamics, pretty solid. Navigation, you know, reading your charts was pretty good. There's a few things that, you know, I brought out that was a little, you were like, oh, I got no idea. I'd have to look that up.
Mhm.
But that's the expectation. You're not expected to know everything on the chart. And the fact that you didn't just guess at it was great, right? You were
Mhm.
like, hey, I need to look that up. I can't come up with a guess. Because
Mhm.
DPEs recognize that the student that's going to guess and come up with bullshit answers is the same student that's going to put their airplane or put themselves in dangerous situations because they're guessing on whether or not it's safe.
Mhm.
Okay. So somebody who's willing to look stuff up, great. Aeromedical stuff, your hypoxia is a little weak, but you do have that fun little card to kind of
Mhm.
back yourself up. It's great. Hazardous attitudes was just fine. You've got
Mhm.
personal minimums, and that's awesome to hear. You know, a Cirrus pilot with written, solid personal minimums that like you're going to abide by.
Mhm.
And when it comes to, you know, deviating from your personal minimums, build a mitigation strategy
Mhm.
associated with it, right? So if you say, hey, maybe I can do more than 7 knot crosswinds now,
Mhm.
why? What have you done since when you said it and now to give you the idea that you can do more? Have you gotten more
Mhm.
training? Have you gotten more experience with crosswinds? Have you put in
Mhm.
yourself in or have you ended up in situations that exceeded that
Mhm.
limitation accidentally and you did
Mhm.
fine, right?
Mhm.
You know, when I think my instructor put a 5 knot crosswind limitation in my for an endorsement for my cross countries and my solos and stuff. Uh, I found the limit of my airplane. It's 27 knots. 27 knot crosswind is the limit. Okay.
Is that
Now,
the demonstrated or is that like
that is it. The
okay?
airplane could not maintain lateral control anymore at 27 knots. That was not demonstrated. I think demonstrated in mine is like 12.
Got it.
But what I'm getting at is that little private pilot Adrian had no